We're going to do some introductions in a bit, and I'm just going to give a brief introduction to myself and what we're going to be doing. Um, so let me make sure I'm recording. Okay, so I'm Suzanne Doolin, and I'm the founder of Get a Bigger Boat. Please ignore this QR code for this. It's for a different webinar. Excuse me. I live in Fernandina Beach, Florida, but I grew up in Birmingham, Alabama, on the campus of Indian Springs School. So both of my parents were amazing teachers, and this is them here, my mom and my dad, and my brother and sister and I on the campus of the school. And so were all of our neighbors. So literally, I grew up surrounded by education. And it's no surprise that both my brother and my sister went into education. My brother is currently the principal of a Montessori school. My sister was in elementary education for many years, and now she's a nurse practitioner. So anyway, I'm going to talk a little bit about how this informed what I'm going to be teaching you today. When I was 19, I had this really transformative experience of mindfulness, a sudden awakening experience. And a year later, I took a yoga course, and that connected me to that experience in a smaller but a consistent way every time. And so, really young, I knew that I wanted to be a yoga teacher and that it was my path. And I'm going to talk more about that path in a little bit. Pardon me, my throat's a little froggy. However, I didn't really see a way to make yoga a sustainable career. So I pursued engineering. I was a technical writer, and I eventually became an instructional designer. And a lot of what I'm teaching you today comes out of this field of instructional design. I supported product rollouts, and I worked closely with product development, marketing, sales, and technical teams. But even when I was making my living in engineering, yoga was a really important part of my life. Through the internet, I connected with a very renowned teacher, Eric Schiffman, and moderated his Moving into Stillness discussion board. So, in thousands of conversations, quite literally thousands of conversations with yoga practitioners and teachers all over the world, I really noticed that there were two big struggles. And one of them was, how do you build a sustainable business? Welcome. And the other was, how do you develop your own unique teaching style? So when I began pursuing my master's in and engineering management, like you see here, my professor asked me to reflect on my true calling. And that was really quite a gut punch, because here I was in engineering school, but I literally had a calling when I was 19 to go into yoga. And it was kind of one of those, when God closes a door, he opens a window thing, because it was the head of my department in engineering management who helped me to start up Get a Bigger Boat. So I help teachers to become better teachers. I help them to use the skills of instructional design to understand what they're supposed to be doing when they teach, and to help them design their own unique training curricula, which I really believe that all of you need to be doing. So now I have a little moment here for y'all to introduce yourselves. And this is my first time teaching it. So I would love, love, love to learn more about what you're seeking, so I can speak to what you're wanting to know. So I see two people on the screen, so I'm going to call you out in turn. So Giselle.
Hi. Hello.
Hi, can you tell me a little bit about your background in teaching and who you teach, and when did you complete yoga teacher training?
Sure. So I've been a teacher, a yoga teacher since 2017. Prior to that, I was a registered nurse for a decade, and I was living in Canada. So all of this was in Canada. I moved to the States because I followed a boy and married said boy. So now I live here, and I'm just starting to get back into teaching. And I just started my 300-hour training actually. So I'm just taking it all in. And I feel like I sort of not fell off the path of teaching, but there was so much more going on in my life that I sort of moved away from it. And now I'm being called back to it. So I just really want to dive back in everything I could possibly grasp.
Yay.
Yeah.
Thanks. Nice to meet you.
Thank you. Nice to meet you.
How about you, Kat?
Hi, everybody. My name's Kat Regan, and I live in Arizona. And I've been teaching yoga since 2002. I started out teaching kids. I actually volunteered at my children's school. I was PTO president, and the principal asked me to reach out to the parents to see if anyone would volunteer to offer, some kind of like extra curriculum and share what they do. And so I decided, I started doing yoga at 15, and I thought, wow, I'm not a teacher, but I love it. And so I started volunteering. And that's when I really fell in love with it, realized, I really want to do this. So I got my teacher training, and I went all the way through, first got my 200 hour, and then I loved it so much. I went all the way to 500 hour. And then I taught kids for 15 years. I had up a program. Several other teachers and I started um, a, a company to help yoga teachers teach kids in school because schools really couldn't afford to pay to have
Right.
classes. So we wanted to start a nonprofit organization that we could raise funds to support teachers to volunteer at school and still get
Oh, that's so wonderful.
your
I love
organization.
that.
Yeah, and so we did that for a number of years, and then I went while I was teaching kids, I started teaching at a senior center. So I went to the other spectrum, and I taught seniors for a number of years, including Alzheimer's
Oh,
patients.
wow.
I loved that was just so rewarding. And to see the change and the instant results on the effect that yoga had on the Alzheimer's patients was amazing. And so I continued to do that for a number of years. And so now I'm kind of teaching. I have regular students. When pandemic hit, I started teaching online because the senior center shut down. The yoga studio I was teaching at shut down. And so did all of the Alzheimer's centers. They didn't shut down, but they didn't want anyone coming in. So,
It's different too when you teach online.
yeah. So, and I continue to teach online, and a lot of my students actually like it. And my older students, they after pandemic, that they really were afraid to go back out into the public. So online teaching is so different, and it's not the same as teaching in person. But I think as I came to the conclusion it was better than not teaching at all. So
Great.
I
Well,
can.
thank you so much for sharing everything. I want to make sure everybody gets a chance to talk, but also I just wanted to thank you for sharing all of that. And also, if y'all have any questions, particularly that you want to get out of this, and let me know. Would love to know if there's something really driving your interest in this webinar. Gagan, is that correct?
I was gonna say,
Hi.
yeah. I, sorry, I can't really see myself, so I
I
don't know
can't
if
see you either. I can see your jackets.
I I've been practicing yoga for a long time as well. However, I've finished my teacher training recently, and I am teaching at the moment just on a part time as a hobby. I would say more to contribute, into a community and everything. Yeah, I do teach to elderly people. There are some community centers. So I do teach there alongside with my full-time job. So I just wanted to see this is something I'm really, passionate about. I would love to share this yoga practice, with the world and with the people. I also do some kirtan. Kirtan, I don't know if you know the basically a singing.
Yeah, Kirtan. Yes.
So I'm also involved in that. So I'm just thinking like like to come up with something along with the yoga and the music together.
That sounds
So
wonderful. I love Kirtan. Thank you, Kaka. Dia, hi, nice to see you.
Hey, it's good to be here. Um, Yeah, so I love yoga. It's hard to separate myself from yoga at this point. So I discovered yoga when I was young, when I didn't even realize it was yoga. So it was very similar to like what you were sharing. It's kind of an awakening for me to discover the connection to breath and stillness and where that place of healing is. And then later when I did went to yoga classes, I'm like, oh, that's what that was. And so I've had yoga help me recover from a back injury where I broke my back and my leg, but I didn't know my leg was broken because I was paralyzed. And then later I was in another accident. So I don't, but I just found that every challenge I've ever had, that yoga is my healing modality, whether it's physically, mentally, emotionally, in relationships. Um, and so that's why I'm so passionate about teaching, and it's just sharing the gifts that I've received from yoga, and to make sure other people have that access to that healing that's available. So I'm
Thank you,
interested.
Tia.
Thank you.
Diaz also loves you. We're good friends. So okay, Jamie, are you able to talk? Not everybody's in a position to talk, but can you unmute for a minute? There you are, briefly.
Oh,
So-
sorry, I came in late,
It's
so
okay.
I'm not sure what the question. I see
So
the
we just
thing
want to
up
know a
here.
little about what do you teach, who are your students, and what was the question? When did you complete yoga teacher training?
It was during COVID, and I did some online meditation and specific and some yoga classes during COVID to help people cope just for free. And style yoga, I'm kind of eccentric. I take a little bit of everything and make it work for me. I like to use a lot of nature and meditation and teaching yoga outside. I do horse yoga as well. And yeah, that's
Right.
it.
I love all these different modalities that people teach.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you. Robin. There's another person trying to join. Robin, are you there? Not everybody is in a position where they can talk. I'll give them one more minute. Her. Okay. And then Steph, are you able to talk at all? Okay. We're going to move on. And then if you can talk later, you can. I know not everybody is able to talk. Was everybody able to say hello that wanted to? I think I got through the whole list. I have one more person who's trying to join, but they're not getting, I'm not able to add them in yet. So I see something in the chat. Oh, the mic. Yeah, no problem. Steph, we'll hopefully get a chance for you to talk in a minute. Okay. Let me see.
Can you hear me now by any chance?
Oh, yes. Hi.
Hi. I was like talking and then I realized, oh, wait a minute. This happens to work a lot. My mic. I am actually a almost brand new teacher. I completed my yoga teacher training last year in June. But I didn't do anything with it for like about 6 months. I was a bit yoga out, so I needed a break. I just started teaching at the studio that actually made me fall in love with yoga and that, supported me so much during a heartbreak. And, like someone was mentioning here before, yoga is so healing that, it helped me go through all that. But my class is brand new. Students don't really know me. And so I've been having a little bit of challenge getting people to come in.
Mhm.
From the 2 months that I've been teaching, I think like 3 or 4 weeks, I have not had a student. We started off with a beginner's vinyasa, which we shifted into some sort of a meditation and slow awakening class since it's a Sunday morning.
Mhm.
But I'm still finding it a little bit challenging to get students engaged with a new teacher in a new class.
Right.
And so I honestly, all I want to do is like teach, right? And I actually, fun fact, I have an audition this evening for a studio that is literally across the street from my house. So I am a little bit nervous, but I'm preparing. I think everything will go well. I have a good feeling about it. But yeah, I just wanted to get, some of your knowledge in terms of, learning to be a good teacher and finding your own voice, right?
I hope that, yes, exactly. This is very much about your own voice. And I hope that we give you a few tips that you can use for tonight's audition. Good luck with
Thank you.
that.
Thank
And then
you.
there's one other person who hasn't unmuted, but like I said, not everybody's in a position to do that. So I'm going to move forward. I'm going to talk a little about my journey through yoga. And if you didn't get to talk, just let me know and I'll make sure that you do. So just to tell a little about like all the issues that I had figuring out how to get better. And I want you to listen as I'm talking about like all of these struggles that I had with practicing consistently and how I was restarting every few years with a new teacher. I had a lack of direction from the teachers. And this is kind of crazy because I literally have like some of the top teachers in the world. So like it's kind of nuts that, it was so challenging for me, even considering how skillful all my teachers were. I'm going to close out the chat so I can see everything. Um, so when I was 19, I had this awakening experience, and there were three key learnings that I got out of that. And the first was that I was in a sense of time that had shifted from being in a past, present, and future to like being in the present and then meeting every moment as it came. So that there was a confidence that I could handle the present moment. And then I didn't have to worry about the future. It was just as it arose, I could deal with that. And then the second thing was that I went into a witness consciousness. I was able to observe my own reactions to things very neutrally without without being caught up in those feelings. And I also was able to do it with a kindness. So I was observing myself with kindness. I was able to observe emotions, like my emotions, without being stuck in those emotions. And then the third aspect of that day was that I had a sense of my own individual self as being a part of the whole. So I was still my own individual self, but it was much, much larger. It was as if I could perceive like a global consciousness, but like expressed through me. So I can say all of that today in this like really, more clear way, but it's taken me like 30 years to be able to even put that into language. I did not have any prior experience with spirituality. I did not have any language for what had happened to me. I didn't really even know what the next step was. And so it was really unclear to me what to do exactly with this, even though in a way it was like a big guidepost. In another way, it was a little like, okay, but what am I supposed to be doing? So about a year later, I took a yoga class. You can see my a little excerpt of my transcript here that for PE. I had to take a PE credit. And what I noticed was every time that I took that class, that little spark of that feeling would be there afterward. Maybe it was more, maybe it was less, but it was the only time I'd ever been able to consistently move into that feeling. So I just knew like, okay, I'm supposed to be a yoga teacher. This is what I'm supposed to do. Whatever gets me to that place, that's what I'm supposed to do. So after college, I moved home to Birmingham, Alabama, which is where I grew up. And I took this was like a very different world back then. Like it was just very unusual to be able to find a yoga class even back then. So there was one at the Unitarian Universalist Church basement. So I took, and that teacher was an Iyengar teacher. And it was so different from my PE class, where it was very clear what I was supposed to be doing with my feet, with my arms. Every pose, there was a right way, there was a wrong way to do it. There was so much structure in how she taught. There was a clarity that there were steps like that. I was in level 1, and that was what she taught, but that there were other teachers who taught level 2, level 3. I bought the book Light on Yoga, and he had instructions for practicing. He had pictures of the poses. I would try to practice on my own, but there's a lot of Sanskrit in that book, and I was still a real beginner. Plus, the practices were like quite long, and it was a lot to sit down and try to go through and flip back and forth. Like, it wasn't that easy to practice along with that book. But I was kind of like obsessed with it. And it was like, oh, like here's a learning path. And so I really wanted to be on Iyengar Yogi because they had a curriculum and they had a way to get better. I didn't really like see it that way at the time, but that was really like what was so appealing about it to me. Okay, my notes are out of order. Let's see. So here we go. Okay, so sorry, just printed out my notes right before this. Okay, just stop. Okay, so anyway, so I had a book, I had a curriculum, there was a structured approach, there was a path to be a teacher. And then I moved to the DC area, and there I studied with the only yoga studio that was around, which just happened to be Unity Woods, which is the studio of John Schumacher. And he's shown here, and this is like him probably like today, but I studied with him when he was like just first setting up his studio. And he was actually the first yoga teacher that Iyengar gave permission to teach. When he was teaching, first of all, I started all over again because was he going to teach the same poses as the teacher that I had in Birmingham? It had been a few months since I had taken. I wasn't sure if if I could keep up in a level 2, even though like I was probably at a level 2 in Birmingham. Like I wasn't confident and he wasn't telling me. So I started all over again. He was very intimidating, not like mean or anything, but he was just so good. And I was so young and I was like 22 years old. It was really important to me. Didn't I didn't know how to, act. So I was quite shy. I often would go to classes with his other teachers because I didn't feel like I was good enough to study with him. And he was, I didn't know this at the time, but he was just training up his teachers. Like he had just opened up the studio. So often I would come to his studio and he would be training other teachers. So I would come to their class and then he'd be in the back of the class observing them. And he would sometimes interrupt the class and start showing the teachers how to teach. I have a very strong memory of being in his class, and he took over, started teaching 3-part yogic breathing. He taught the teacher how to set up the props. He taught her how to observe my breathing. And so I was the student and he was teaching his teacher how to teach. So I, really thought like, this is how you learn to teach, right? Like somebody is giving you all of this personal assistance, like this is what it'll be like when I become a teacher. So I moved around as a young person, got, started in my life. I was not near a yoga studio. I wasn't reaching out to yoga studios because I had all of these like feelings around, what I should be practicing. There was a lot of like fear in a way and lack of confidence. So I didn't quite know where to go. Eventually, I moved up to the DC area, north of DC, to Columbia, Maryland. And there was a yoga studio about 5 minutes from my house. That was the Columbia Yoga Center. And I started studying with Bob Glickstein, who's the teacher here on the left. And as you can see, he is like a super physically adept person. And I was too. I was very acrobatic. And so I wanted to be good at yoga. I was reading Light on Yoga. I wanted to stick my foot on the back of my head and do all those things. And I kind of thought that from just like what I was inferring, that, all this spiritual stuff that I wanted to get to, that I was feeling, that if I just got good enough at Iyengar, that eventually I could learn it. Like that eventually, if I got really skillful, then they would let me start meditating. And they would let me, they would start talking about the philosophy, but it was really quite physical. I started at level 1 because I didn't know whether he was going to teach the same poses, even though it was Iyengar. I didn't know if I had been away from it for a few years, so would I be able to, like, to start again? Like, I needed to physically train up. I started at level 1. I started going up the levels. I got pregnant, started going down the levels. And then I got to the point where I just couldn't do I couldn't lie on my stomach. I just couldn't do it anymore. So I took a prenatal class with the second teacher, Helen Heffer, and it was much more like my first PE class. It was very gentle, very nurturing. Of course, we're all pregnant, right? So, you got a lot of pregnant ladies, but there was a community. We talked, we shared. She would sing to us, Gagan, and of course, the postures were quite gentle, and there was just a nurturing quality to the class. After I delivered my daughter, I wanted to get back to Iyengar as soon as possible. I started once again going back up the levels, got to level 3, 4. I could do all kinds of advanced asana, and still no one was talking to me about meditation or spirituality. They offered a yoga teacher training, and I took that. And then when I had the yoga teacher training, I was, first of all, there were only 6 of us in that class. There was one woman who had never, ever been to class before. I'd never seen her in the studio ever. She was a doctor, and from what I gather, her qualifications for being in yoga teacher training was she had a very flexible wallet. And so here I was in this class, and I had waited years and years and years until I felt like I knew yoga in my body. And then here was this person who had literally just bought her way into the class and had no prior knowledge of yoga at all. And I was kind of like, why the heck is this lady in here? It was really weird. He taught us 60 yoga poses, and really broke them down, which I was really already getting because I was in level 3, 4. So we kind of already did that anyway. There was a book. There was a teacher training book. There was some clarity about the Sanskrit terms for every pose and how to use them. And I was kind of like, well, where's the meditation? Where's the philosophy? I've been waiting all my life for this. I started assisting with the level 2 class, and I got very, very, very little personal attention for my assisting. That was probably because that class completely blew up and you had 70 people in the class, but also that dream I had of having some one-on-one attention, that never happened. At that point, Heifer called me up. Helen, she goes by Heifer, and she called me up and she said, I'm leaving my teacher training. I'm going to give up one of my classes at community college. Would you take it over? So I took over her class. So it was this teacher. I spent thousands of dollars at Bob's studio. He did not give me an opportunity to teach there. This teacher I'd taken one class with for a month called me up, and she was the one who gave me my opportunity to teach. And then she was starting an advanced class, and I left and I started studying with her. So I became now a Kripalu yogi. Her classes were so different. She would walk in with notes. She was prepared. There was a spiritual focus. The class, we would always talk. There was meditation. There was pranayam. The postures were athletic in a way, but also you could not look around the room and see who was doing them better. It was just internally very challenging. She was so prepared. But on the other hand, every class was just radically different, just radically different. And so it was very difficult for me as a teacher to start incorporating what she was teaching into my own teachings because there was so little repetition. And I never quite knew what I was supposed to be doing. I'm going to take something to drink. So then I also, around this time, I found through online Eric Schiffman. He wrote the book Yoga, The Spirit and Practice of Moving into Stillness, which is used in a lot of yoga teacher training programs. He was a really popular teacher at the time, but he was out in LA and I was in the DC area. He had a discussion board that I ended up moderating. I took lots and lots and lots of workshops with Eric. He, to me, in his book, was describing very similar spiritual experience to, like, he was describing that spirituality and talking about it in his classes. And so I felt such an affinity for what he was teaching. When he taught, he would repeat a lot. And I was able, he kind of blew my mind in how he taught originally. But then over time, because even though I was only seeing him at workshops, because he was repeating, I was able to start absorbing what he was teaching. I took his teacher training, and I am a freedom yoga teacher today in his tradition. However, in all of that time, and I took some other teacher trainings as well, I never had anybody assess me as a teacher. I never had anybody sit in the back of the room and look at me and say, "You're doing a great job." I never had anybody really talk with me about what I wanted to be teaching and how I designed that. And the teacher that I really admired so much, Helen Heffer, never offered a curriculum to become a yoga teacher with her. So today, that's why I help people to design their their curriculum, to gain confidence as teaching. I just think it's so important that not only we pass on the teachings of our teachers, which means that we have to be able to understand what they're teaching, and so we can pass it on, but then also add to that knowledge of yoga in the world. So I'm going to tell you some ideas that come out of instructional design that I hope the biggest thing I want you to get out of it is thinking about how you structure your time in class. And also, I want you to be aware that there's like really proven tools for how you, as a teacher, design a class so that students can really learn. And don't let me forget to address that it's important for people we have so many people with different students. So I want to make sure that I give you some information about that. Any questions before I move on to this? Okay, so I said I went to all these great schools, and this is what would happen when I went to college, right? I was expected to pay attention in class. When I walked in, that first, started the semester, they would give me a syllabus. I would have books that I was supposed to read. If I was studying, something where it was continuing from a previous course, they would remind me about what I previously learned. They had the material in a structured way that it was presented. They gave us worksheets. They gave us exercises in class that they would grade. And then we got assessed on midterms and finals and tests. And then at the end of the semester, they'd say, like, here's some additional reading that you can have, or even along the way, they might say, here's some other things you can read. So in in my yoga teacher training program and in what I was being helped to teach, the biggest thing that was missing was I really had no idea at any point along the way, in the big picture way, of what my teachers were looking for me to do. Like, maybe in that class one day, they might be saying, okay, we're working on our feet or we're working on our hands. But like big picture, at the level 2, what was I supposed to be getting out of that? What was I supposed to be learning, like kind of as an overarching goal at different points in my learning? Nobody told me. Like, I just had no idea. And that's why I kept going back and back and back to level 1, because I had no idea if I had actually learned anything. In yoga classes, this is really, we're also not often given supporting materials in the classroom. We're not given books. Like, at least I think what was so appealing about Iyengar was he had a book, and the book had clarity about what I was supposed to practice, or at least some kind of guidance. Nobody was telling me how to practice on my own, which is what I really wanted to be doing. It just wasn't really talked about. So there was so much that was missing from regular teaching, of regular instruction. And I didn't really understand it. It's just that I had been around school so much that something felt like it was missing. And what was really missing was I had no idea what the teachers wanted me to do. So then as a teacher, that is really the most important thing that you can communicate to a student is, what do you want them to be able to do when they're done with your lesson or with your class or with your curriculum. So I'm going to talk a little bit about instructional design and how this filled in a lot of the gaps for me. A lot of the concepts that I'm teaching here, they come from instructional design. Instructional designers, they develop training programs for all ranges of ages on all topics. They apply the principles of how people learn best to shape a lesson, a course, or a complete curriculum. Instructional design, it started in World War II. So what happened was they drafted all of these soldiers into the war, and then it was literally a matter of life or death that they learned the skills that they needed. And so the people who were designing these training programs, they could kind of rapidly iterate because they were training people and then they could see what worked and then they would train more people. But they really wanted to know, like, how can we train them well? Because it's so important that they learn. And we had so many people to teach. And then after the war, all these people came home and the economy was booming. So a lot of those people moved into corporate world and started training people up for job skills. And so instructional design it is an education, but it's seen a lot in the corporate world more. And that's why you probably may not be as familiar with it. So I think one of the biggest things that is missing from what are we teaching is not even really knowing what it is to learn or what it is to know. So the goal of learning is for something to become reflexive and innate in you. But the process of learning that is slow and arduous. So I'm going to give you an example. So if you remember when you learned to drive a car, you could see that your parents could have one arm on the door and they could have one hand barely on the wheel and they could fiddle with the radio and they could drive, they could get you where you were going, no problem. It was like they barely paid attention. But then when you learned how to drive, you had to put your hand up the 10 and the 2 on the wheel. You had your foot on the gas and then the brake and you were kind of lurching around the corner, and that's how you started. But now I bet you that you drive like your parents, that you really don't pay that much attention to it because you know it. It's innate in you. So the process of teaching is helping people through that struggle of learning, the struggle of knowing, hey, I'm not driving like mom and dad. Why I must be terrible at this. I must be a slow learner. Helping people through that, that's what your role is as a teacher. The moment that you gain knowledge it's a really defined moment. So there's this moment when all your efforts just fundamentally shift and alter your perspective. So once you obtain this understanding, you can never go back. And we have a lot of little terms for that, like the aha moment, the moment when the penny drops, when everything clicks, the light bulb. These are all expressions that capture how there is in an instant a shift from struggling to learn to understanding. So as a student, those moments feel really, really magical. And as a teacher, it's possible to design training that intentionally gets your students to that moment of realization. Teaching is a pleasure. There's nothing more wonderful than being around a student when they suddenly get what you've been working so hard to communicate. It's helping your students through that struggle of learning so that they can get to that moment of knowing. And another way of just saying this is people always know what they're screwing up, but they very rarely know what they're doing right. And so really your role as a teacher is to help people to see what they're doing. So a curriculum, one of the really important observations of instructional design is that people learn in a step-by-step fashion. So even a professional driver still started with their hands at the 10 and the 2. And that is, it doesn't matter how good you are or how far you advance. Everybody starts with beginner skills. And it's a really loose guide, but I say it takes around 2 years for somebody to go all the way up to where it really clicks for them and they become, kind of like a really skillful master. And a curriculum takes a learner through a learning transformation. It maps out a complete set of courses that takes to get a learner to that light bulb moment. It's a fundamental shift in how they perceive and interact with the world. So I often see people come to me, and I teach a course, digital course creation boot camp, where I help people to create online training. And it's really common for people to come to me and they've been planning this huge course. And one of the things that I talk with them about is, are you planning a course or do you have a whole curriculum? And the biggest thing that I see is that people really struggle to understand what the beginners really ought to know. It's like if they could have the intermediate people in front of them, they'd be great, but they're really struggling with, how do I teach the rote beginners? One of the reasons that I could not put all this together was I didn't know that there were different domains of learning. So when I was trying to relate all this to my experience in school, all of that was in what we call the mental domain. So, obviously, like having a syllabus and all the things that we do in college to teach like philosophy or psychology just didn't really apply to like yoga postures. And I didn't realize that there were steps of learning also in the physical domain and the behavioral domain. So just as we know how people learn to get started with reading, we know how people get started with physical skills, and we know how they get started with behavioral skills. And I'm going to show you how that progresses. So for a beginner, they need terms and definitions. So one of the biggest things for me, my teachers were pretty good about teaching me Sanskrit and like different poses, but there was not really like any point where somebody came in and kind of said like, here is the beginner terms and definitions. Here is what, I could read it in the books, but I never had a teacher like kind of give it to me in a structured way. I was sort of constantly learning terms and definitions over and over and over again. So terms and definitions is where beginners start. And then the next thing is they should be able to paraphrase those ideas. And as an intermediate person, they start doing problem solving with those ideas. And then on an advanced level, when it's innate, it's like a creative. It's part of who you are. It's part of how you structure your ideas. For physical skills, the first step is to observe, pay attention, observe a demo, and then to try to mimic the teacher awkwardly. So it's very, very useful as a teacher to understand that this is what is expected of a beginner. Because if somebody comes to class and they're really struggling, it is really wonderful for you as a teacher to be able to look at them and say, you are doing exactly what I wanted you to do. And it's really useful as a teacher for you to really believe that, because you actually know that that is exactly what you wanted them to do. Because a lot of teachers kind of expect, like, I'm going to come and I'm going to teach and everybody's going to be so good at it. And then they look out in the room and everybody's like, had no idea where to put their feet. Like you're just like, what? Well, like it's just so useful to know that they're going to be really terrible at it when they start, and that as long as they're trying to follow you, they are doing it perfectly. And then you can start to get to the point where you can give them cues, and you're just going to, okay, get into this one and this one and this one, and they can do it without you having to demo. Then, and as they're doing this, they are becoming more fluid in their movements. Eventually, they start to coordinate those skills together into a series of actions. They become graceful and fluid, and then it just becomes part of your body language. It becomes your muscle memory. So I got a line that's a little high up. So, it's like this is just innate in how you are. I'll give you an example of this. I had a teacher who was she taught modern dance. And, you did not have to see this woman dance a single step to know that she was a modern dancer. It was so in her body, so in her expressions, so in how she was, that you just knew she wasn't a ballerina, she wasn't a jazz dancer, she was a modern dancer. It was the language of her body. And that is how we want to get to be as yoga teachers and as yoga practitioners. And then there's this other aspect of teaching, which I think so many of us are trying to get to with adults, which is how do we teach behaviors? And behaviors also follow a known step. So the first one is just they pay attention to you, they're aware. And a lot of y'all, this is actually your marketing. And then again, terms and definitions need to be introduced. And then they're just doing what you tell them to do. So if you wanted me to practice at home, you could just hand me, a worksheet and say, okay, here's your 10-minute practice. This is what I want you to do. And you don't really explain it. You don't try to get them to understand it. It's just like, go and do this, follow my video. The next step is for them to adopt the beliefs as their own, internalize those beliefs, and they start to become a leader in a group. So a lot of behaviors happen in groups. And this is why it was important that Heifer was teaching this group experience where we were all coming together, because within the group, we were able to reinforce each other's habits. Some of us who were more experienced were able to take on a role, and that helped us to see that we actually had advanced in our learning. And then the next step is really to become a teacher, to have this be your life, your whole, all of y'all are at this point with yoga, right? It's your whole life. Like now, you're a teacher. It's just who you are. It's how you do. This is how you think about your life. So, but for rope beginners, when they come, they're going to be like me when I started out. They're going to be like really, scared to participate, not really knowing what it is. And to make people welcome, part of that is to have a community, help to introduce them, and also to make things so simple for them, to give them those basic terms and definitions, to not assume that they know where to put their mat or that they need to take their shoes off or what a strap is. Let them teach them as if they know nothing, and then help them to feel comfortable to approach you. Having like John Schumacher was such an intimidating teacher. He was so skillful, and I learned a lot from observing him. However, I never felt really comfortable to approach him and to ask him for guidance, and how different my career might have been had I felt that I could. He probably would have been great if I had just been a little more bold. But on the other hand, like maybe also he should have made himself a little more approachable. So there's a known structure for how you teach a class, and it's I call it the hamburger approach. And this is, you tell them what you're going to say, and then you say it, and then you tell them what you said. Oops, I have that in. And this is really it's called the 9 events of instruction. And the main thing that I want you to see, I couldn't explain the whole 9 events of instruction, is how much of this really hinges on knowing what you're going to teach and being able to explain it. So if you can tell people, here's what I want you to achieve today, and then you're going to, teach that. And then you can observe, are they actually able to do that one thing that you're trying to teach, provide feedback on that one thing, and then assess them down the road for how are they actually learning it. So that, at some point there's not necessarily a test like, oh, I'm going to give them a written test, but a test like, can they actually do the thing that I taught? Can I observe that they're learning it? And can they get that feedback that they achieved it? So say at the end of 6 weeks, is there some point where they get told like, here's the advancement that you made from week 1 to week 6. And I'd never see that in a yoga class. Like, like there's never a yoga class where at week 6, the teacher steps to the back of the room and says, I want to see what you're doing. And then says, let me tell you what you've done in the 6 weeks, where you started and where you are now. So this is the structure for how you write a learning objective, and it's really like how you decide what to teach. It's a fill in the blank exercise called a learning objective, and it goes by the end of, and then this would be, so a learning event is a class It could be a lesson or a course, like, one class or 6 classes or a whole curriculum. So it's however long you're teaching, the student's going to be able to, whatever they're going to be able to do. And there's a very specific set of words you put in here. And then what are you going to teach them? And then give them the tools and information that they need to succeed. So let's say, for example, by the end of the lesson, the student will be able to put their feet in the proper position for triangle pose, given a yoga mat and instruction from the teacher. So then, I'm going to need a yoga mat. The student, this is what I'm looking for. We're going to talk about the feet today. I'm only going to give feedback about the feet. I'm not going to be confusing the student by teaching them about the feet and then talking about the arms when I assess their learning. There's a clarity and a focus to what you teach when you go in knowing what you want them to be able to do. Okay, so here's just a wind up of what we taught. So what is teaching? What is learning? Some key principles of teaching and how to structure a class using that hamburger approach of, tell them what you're going to say so that they know what to listen for, and then say it, and then assess what they're learning and help them to retain it as they move out of the classroom. Okay, so questions and answers.
I have a question.
Yeah.
And this has been something that has been a little bit challenging and hard to unlearn and learn again. But where do you stand with the whole alignment versus everybody's body is different? And right, and how do you come up into terms with either or another, right? Because I hear in places, you can't be telling people to align the same way to align other people, right?
Yes. So it's very useful for, teach the rules and then teach people how to break the rules. It's very, very useful for people to understand what they're supposed to be doing. So as far as, all of that strict alignment that I taught, I don't really, that I learned, I don't really teach that so much anymore. I have different ways of teaching that help people to be more aware of their own bodies now. I try to teach people how to have body awareness in what I teach. But,
Okay.
A beginner often just doesn't have any body awareness. Like, it's shocking how many times you can tell a beginner, put your feet straight ahead, and then they have, you look down and you're like, why are your feet all crazy? They don't know, they don't have body awareness. So I think it's important to teach them, it's that thing from this slide about, let's go back, about behavior, where you just tell them what to do.
Okay.
Like early on, you just need to be clear and give them structure, like this is how it's supposed to be. But as far as the alignment part of it, I personally do not teach, I personally don't teach so much as alignment. I teach it as, I do tell people the position of their hands and feet, but I don't necessarily teach that the alignment has to be, how do I say it? I teach general principles of movement.
Okay.
If that makes sense. Does that answer your question?
Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. I can tell you what I teach as far as asana. So the way I teach it, because structure is really important to people. So I teach a step-by-step process. So the first step is to get the foundation of the pose just right. So put your hands, your feet, whatever touches the floor and takes weight. The second step is to get into a rough draft of the pose. So that doesn't necessarily, you're just kind of getting the rough shape. The third step is to find the movement of breath in your body so that there's a rise and fall of the breath. The fourth step is to go to the full expression of that pose for that day, which in a restorative pose means that you're going even more deeply rested. And in a more dynamic pose, you're going to a more dynamic expression. And then the final step is to release out of that and pause.
Awesome.
So I don't necessarily I am showing them what to do with their body, but I'm not necessarily giving over time with people, I'll give them more detailed feedback on what they want to do. Also, I promised I would talk about students because so many people have different students.
Mm-hmm.
So a lot of that has to do with the student. So, I've had students who want to like be super physically adept. So often I have students come in, they had like a Iyengar training and they're like, I want to do a headstand. I want to do this. I want to like, really, really be like physically skillful. So in that case, it's like, I'll take you that far if you want. But I also have students who come in and they want to do like emotional work. And so I'm just not teaching it in that way for those students. It really your learning objectives really come out of who are the students. If you're talking like somebody saying they teach people with Alzheimer's, okay, is the goal for that person to do a headstand? Is the goal for that person to be, like, are we looking for somebody with Alzheimer's to be like, looking like Iyengar in his book? No. Like the objectives that we have for different learners varies with their capability. With children, we're looking at different objectives. With rote beginners, we're looking at different objectives. With people who come in and their goal is some kind of interior transformation or spiritual transformation, all of those objectives are different. And so I like to assess each learner separately and then help them to achieve the goals that are important to them.
Great. Thank you so much.
You're
That
welcome.
helps.
Anyone else have
Nice.
questions?
Yeah, no, I think I'm good. Yeah, just it was nice to know, your point of view and your prospect towards teaching a classes because what I've been learning, it was like if you look at the authentic side of yoga, asanas are meant to be just a one small portion of yoga. There is a 8 limbs of yoga, isn't it? So yeah, it's really nice. You have given a different approach. The teacher I've seen, or what I try to usually tell my student is, like connecting to our breath is the most important thing, isn't it?
Right.
Like that. That's really like develop the being present, in the moment that teaches us. And also, what I've learned is, from the teachers when I was taking a training in India and here as well. Like saying, the ultimate goal for the yoga is being equanimous, like just being fully controlled, not to, just for the overall life. And also, I know the book definition of yoga is fair enough, it's a union of connecting mind and body and spirit, but they were saying like you can look at the yoga as a lifestyle, and they were just saying, you are going ups and down, but our being a teacher, we were keep reminding you, saying, connect to your breath. So it's basically connecting to the ground. So no matter what you do in the life, ups and down, you stay grounded, you stay connected, stay present. And at the end, we let go of everything, whatever you've been trying to do, we come to a shavasana, isn't
Exactly.
it? So
Exactly. And it's so much of the learning theory is really saying that same thing. It's like an objective is not a goal. It's not important that we achieve the thing that we set out for our students to do. There's just a clarity that this is what we're working toward so that they know what to focus on. But then it gives you that ability to like shift and go like, oh my gosh, they're not anywhere, like this is way above their head. Like let's back it up because you can see, well, okay, they're not quite there yet. Or the other way around, like, oh, let's beat it up.
yeah,
So just understanding what you're trying to do, it gives you that ease to be in the moment. But the other thing that you're saying that I want to point out is like, remember I was talking about Iyengar, it was like level 1, level 2, level 3, and a lot of it was about physical skills. It's like, oh, I can do a headstand at this point. So they were, but then it's crazy because if you look at how you assess physical skills, there was nothing in there about achievement of these like physical prowess. It was just about becoming more fluid in the skills. So like if you're teaching something where you're not, like, oh, I don't want to teach people how to do headstand. I want to teach them to relax and enjoy life and be easy. Like, what if they just got better at that to the point where they come in and they're stiff? And then what happens over 2 years is they get to the point they come in and they're like at ease. And that could be your
Yeah,
skill that you teach,
it's really like, in a way, it's a bit bizarre though, isn't it? Like the ultimate, even if you look at anybody who did a teacher training, I don't know whether they've been, ultimate goal for the yoga is reaching to that meditative state, isn't it? We are preparing our body in the asanas, preparing our body to sit
Yes.
for a longer period of time and everything.
Exactly.
And I know it was meant to be like teaching us to be more present. I know the word we use it all the time, a lot, mindfulness. I think it is one of the things, just connecting to our breath and being present and moving along with the breath and and so on.
That's
But
what
yeah, it
I,
was really
finally got to the point where I could articulate, that was my intention, was to get to that experience, and that my intention, like I hit a wall with all the physical, like I became so adept physically. And then I was like, what am I supposed to be doing? Am I supposed to be like a circus freak before I get to the point where I can
that's
meditate? Like, it was so weird. There just was never a path toward finding more, or something that I was reaching. But you know what? My teachers were, Bob never like lied to me about anything. It's just what he wanted to teach was just differently aligned to my goals, So, it, like, I think that's important as a teacher to express to people what you're trying to help them do, so that they can choose whether you're the right teacher for them. And I think that there's not often a lot of clarity, with people, like, hey, you want to go, you want to jump around, like, maybe I'm not your teacher for you, or maybe I am. But like, you have to kind of make it clear to people whether you're going to give them what they want. I just kept on believing that, that there was something more I had to do to be worthy of it.
obviously science backs that up. Like stretching is good for the body and everything, but yoga was meant to be well beyond stretching, rather than just exercising alone. But
Yeah.
anyway, it's been lovely. Thank you
It's
so
been
much for
lovely
your
talking to you. I
time.
want to let y'all know that I do, I wanted to let y'all know how y'all can work with me if you want. So let me just share that with you. I have a share button here. So I just want to let y'all know that I do coaching with yoga teachers. Here you go.
Yeah.
And so if you want to do 3 hours of 3 sessions of coaching with me, I have an offer. It's normally $500, but if you use this link and this code, the code is missing. It'll take $200 off, so it's only $300. It's $100 a session, and we can work to help you like understand your own teaching. You can record things, and I can take a look at it and help you to develop your own teaching. So I just want to make sure that people know that I offer that. I'll leave that up, but I'm going to also leave the window open. As long as people are here, I'm happy to talk. Let me just see if everybody's still here.
Yeah, that's fine. I just have to rush for it now, but I'm sure you will be sending that through email anyway, isn't it? So we'll keep an eye out.
Okay. Bye.
Susan, thank you.
Bye. It was a
Bye,
pleasure
thank
having
you.
you back on. Hi, Dia. There were a couple of people who were not able to get in.
Oh no, what stopped him? Was it the Zoom?
No, I don't know. It says no response. So, and who knows?
Oh, we still have Kat and Steph on the call.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Do y'all have any questions or comments?
Yeah, I just like to thank you for this. It was very, very informative, very interesting. I really appreciate what you talked about in the beginning about how, when you've learned something in through the school's curriculums, how it's very structured, and I was very fortunate, I guess, in reflection of what you were outlining, that I actually took my teacher training at a college.
Oh, nice.
And the teacher, and the reason I did that, because number one, I had 2 kids and I was working full time, and I could not fit into a yoga studio's curriculum, timing, and their price was, beyond my my reach at the time. But the college, I was able to, schedule classes that fit my schedule. And the teacher was an Iyengar. She was an Iyengar certified teacher, and she taught Iyengar style, but we weren't certified in Iyengar at all.
Right.
But her whole approach was Iyengar principles, which I really appreciated, having that alignment background. And then when I went through the whole yoga therapy, it really was such a great training. And then after that, I did several different other styles of yoga and got certified in others. And but not only that, I studied other types of movement and training, like brain gym, and so all those different styles really helped me
And it's
understand that.
like you're supposed to be bringing all of that together because like you're the only person who's done all that. And that's what I'm trying to help people to do is like, this is how you get to your curriculum, because everybody, it's like, oh, am I teaching, brain gym? Am I teaching Iyengar? Am I teaching, like you're drawing from all these traditions. But as a teacher, I want you to get to the point where you have, your like cat yoga, and people aren't teaching how to do that, like specifically how to do that.
Yeah, and I think that that's for me. I realized that you can't teach one thing to everyone.
Yeah.
Everyone's different, and you really have to teach sometimes to where people are, their level, and where they are in their life. Not just physically, but where they are mentally and emotionally, and teaching people in the Alzheimer's situation really taught me a lot too, about just being in the moment. And sometimes it was just, and of course, it did a lot of brain gym with them, because that really
Oh
helped.
yeah, I bet.
And a lot of breathing and a lot of clapping their hands, singing, and getting their bodies moving. And but most of them were in wheelchairs, so they could really only move their upper body, but that was enough. It was enough for them. So
Yeah,
yeah.
no, it doesn't have to look like a physical skill. Like for them, to advance from where they were to wherever they were capable of going is exactly appropriate. And I actually learned about those trainings in the behavioral domain because my stepson was in a home. He was profoundly cognitively disabled. And so all of his learning goals, learning objectives were in that behavioral domain. Nobody had a goal for Adam to like read a book. All of his learning objectives were he could press a button to indicate he wanted to go outside. He could eat his food without crumbling, and everybody in his home had those kind of objectives as well. And so I got to see how over time those people did adopt new behaviors, even when learning took them a really long time. That with consistency and effort, they were able to achieve those learning outcomes. Sometimes it would take them years, but then it was incredible what a shift you would see. Like with Adam, I remember when he started being able to do some of these things, it was like he had just matured so much. All of a sudden it was like, wait, who is this guy? And it was crazy.
No, we do learn from a lot of our experiences, and I think that it's important to gather the experiences and from different avenues and different ways of learning in life, through life, and through not only structured learning, but experience is our biggest learner. And now
Yeah.
and as a teacher, you learn so much. The more you experience teaching, you learn so much as yourself, as a teacher and as a student, because we're always students as much as we're teachers. And I learn a lot from my students, and I appreciate that. And so, but
Well,
I wanted to thank you so much.
thank you so much for being here. I really appreciate it.
Yes, and keep me posted, and thank you for the offer, the coaching.
Oh, yeah, I would love to have you as a client. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Bye, Kat.
Bye.
Hey, Dan.
I'd
Let
start
me stop the recording.
Oh.
Oops.
Let's just continue.
Okay.
I was going to speak up to